church. While leaving to Redfield. Church. I'm saying. That's big. Where is right on my yes, so I keep them together so they're short speed.
They we didn't turn our lights on when you came. You probably set your camera to these lights today, and I will have to really, I'm gonna have to overexpose the fire. And then you yesterday, the lights aren't right.
I got mine set to 640.
Which still might work.
It's, yeah.
Cows, we don't have all the lights. Like, you
Oh,
know,
let me go look. Ask Letitia.
just a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we don't have, because otherwise it's.
Mason. Manson.
He might be in the back. He was back there when I came back.
Yeah, he's not
He's not back there?
You can take a look at this file. and
I'm
see
sure yours is
what-
always, but these particular, yeah, they always.
Yeah, focus, right?
Yeah, that's just.
See,
Make kind of what I'm seeing, but I think that, you know, we get more illuminated. And I'm afraid we get darker people.
Absolutely.
I don't want to overexpose.
Doctor was saying, we see all these scenes as of right now, they're starting. Let's just keep the frame tight, so I'm not seeing too many of these checks.
does she know where the file is?
They're gonna be in the middle, and then a few, I think, are gonna be on the edge of the bucket.
Or directive.
Well, I see by it. So actually, I think we have to get through that. Change.
I mean, you're gonna ask about tonight, then.
Yeah, she's right there, but she's on. That's everything?
Here's my exposure.
I got them all on my high level. Let me know if I need to go higher on the ISO, but it seems like it's.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we just have to, because everyone's not arriving at the same time, which you gotta.
Are you trying?
Friend.
Okay.
No, it's great, thanks. All right, so as soon as Viola gets back to her camera and the teacher gets back to the camera, we'll sleep.
Absolutely. Will you get something to the city? I know you. What else? You're very right. Just said it. Keep on going. I know. On crutches. Okay. Just again. Do you think there's a therapy? That is the catastrophe. You need that.
Good morning. Morning. I have a problem. You go check the camera.
So,
Sneakers. Since I'm fake, you stand. Let's find out. See. Let's see.
oh, you want me? Yeah. Who's my mom?
You're saying the market.
They were sorry for this. I'm not told you.
Yeah.
You want some water? I think.
Yeah, right. Sure. No, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, this are you see and. Turn to your. Okay. Oh, look at me. A bit of problem, wait. Safer than they go
Truth telling session one.
But again, this we. Yeah.
Wait, we have a problem.
Truth telling session one.
We have a problem.
So.
We have a problem. The young man look right here. He's in the camera.
Yeah. Give me some. We can't have a shut down. Yeah, I know. No. Listen to me. No, you don't have to get out. You gotta come down. Oh, you don't have to get out. And then. It's easier. Okay, Andrew.
Truth telling session one. Truth telling session one.
It's an eternal pain.
Good morning.
Morning.
We stand here with a vision for a beloved community yet becoming. And we are so honored to welcome all who are here in person and those who are here virtually. I am Reverend Dr. Ivor Carruthers, and I'm privileged to serve as the Executive Director of the Center for Reparatory Justice, Transformation, and Remediation at McCormick Theological Seminary. And I am also General Secretary Emerita of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. This is a call, the gathering of the spirit of we the people, the spirit of justice for all, and most importantly, the spirit of we will not be silent. Most especially, we gather in the many names of the sacred, the divine, the holy, and all that is good, just, and righteous. I would like for us to begin with a moment of centering in prayer, and I invite Reverend Dr. Waltrina Middleton to lead us. She serves as the Executive Director of the Community Renewal Society and a graduate of Chicago Theological Seminary, one of our consortium schools. Yes.
Shall we take a posture of prayer? For such a time as this, God, where white supremacist patriarchy threatens to take land by any means necessary, we acknowledge the sacred grounds upon which we gather. We honor the sacred disinherited people who were the first and indigenous to this land. For such a time as this, O God, when land is illegally occupied, natural resources are exploited and its people are stolen, we acknowledge the stolen people of the Great Ma'afa forced into enslavement on this land. For such a time as this, O God, where we are global witnesses to genocide, cultural lynching, and global crimes against humanity, we call upon the great cloud of witnesses to offer us strength, courage, and faith to be the prophetic voices and witnesses in the wilderness today. For such a time as this, we call upon the God of the oppressed, the God of the disinherited, the God of love, the God of good, Renee Nicole Good, Silverio Gonzalez, the God of we, the restless, who still believe in freedom. Oh God, guide us in this place, in this work, in this great commission for such a time as this. In the wisdom of the old Negro spiritual, lead me, guide me along the way. For Lord, if you lead us, we cannot stray. For such a time as this we pray. Amen. Ashe.
Thank you, Waltrina. Your prayer, as always, inspires us, it grounds us, it keeps us focused on that which is unseen, for we know that we serve a God that's omnipresent and most powerful. So we're here to stay the course, and we are so pleased that, as it turned out, 3 seminaries are in this space. That was not the original plan, but we plan God last and something else happens. But we do want to give great gratitude for the ways in which the 3 institutions, Catholic Theological Union, McCormick Theological Seminary, and Lutheran Theological Seminary, have come together in this dynamic, challenging time
for seminary education and figured out a way to configure and reconfigure space and intent and relationships in such a way that we have walked into this space and it feels like we're at home. And with that, I would like to invite Father Ensu Del Bracco here to give us a special welcome. President of Catholic Theological Union.
Thank you, Emma.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Catholic Theological Union. Thank you, Dr. Ivan. This is not just a space that we share together in this moment, but I think this is, I would say, a sacred moment that we're all sharing together. As we enter research for truth, it is a sacred space. It's where you take off your sandals and you walk with humility and accept what is about to be revealed. And not always, we know that in God's revelations, they're not always fun. It's about accepting the revelation that is being made through each one of our brothers and sisters. Welcome to CTU. This graduate school of theology is rooted in the city of Chicago, and we believe, and we always believed here since 1967, that theology must be lived, public, and responsive to the realities of sharing people's lives. Faith does not exist apart from the world. It engages the world with honesty, compassion, and courage. Our commitment to justice, reconciliation, and the dignity of every human person is not an option. Our tradition calls us to listen to voices that have been marginalized, to confront systems that cause harm, and to seek transformation rooted in truth. And so therefore, hosting today this commission reflects that commitment and our belief that truth-telling is sacred work. In a recent address to the diplomatic corps of the Holy See, our Chicagoan alumni, the Pope, Leo XIV, reminded the world that truth and language are inseparable, that our words must remain tethered to reality and to charity, and that clear, honest language is essential for authentic dialogue and peace. And in a world where words are sometimes twisted, weaponized, now lies have become alternative truths, the Pope calls us and reminds us, probably why we're gathered here, to tell the truth about harm, to restore meaning to our words, and to honor the dignity of every person. What happens in Chicago matters everywhere. Because what affects one single person affects everyone. The commitment to transcribing and videotaping these hearings and to sharing them beyond this room affirms that these stories matter. They matter to our communities, to the nation, and to the moral conscience of our public life. Therefore, I want to express deep gratitude to the Center for Reparatory Justice, Transformation and Remediation at McCormick Theological Seminary, and the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference for convening this work. As institutions and leaders rooted in faith, we share responsibility to bear witness, to pursue repair, and to accompany communities toward justice and healing. Thank you to the organizers, to the commissioners, to the witnesses, and all who are participating. May these 2 days be marked by courage, care, and truth. And may this work help move us closer to the just and democratic future to which we're called. Welcome to the Catholic Theological Union, and welcome to this vital work. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Perfect timing, Reverend Dr. Rice. We're also in the home of McCormick Theological Seminary, and President, the Reverend Dr. Maisha Bennett is, Maisha Handy is in a number of meetings today. She will be stopping through and in and by, and you will know her by her presence. But in the meantime, we have asked, and she has asked, that her special assistant, Reverend Dr. Derek Rice, welcome us.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
On behalf of the Reverend Dr. Maisha Handy, President of McCormick Theological Seminary, we greet you in the name of the one who orders our steps. On behalf of her and the Center for Reparatory Justice under the leadership of Dr. Ivor Carruthers, we stand in this moment in the real sense, weeping at the blurred lines that we see in our country today and in Chicago. The military force reaches into the neighborhoods that we live in, and raids like Operation Midway Blitz turn our schools and routes into homes that feel more like battlefields. We're forced to ask the question, who's being protected and who's really being policed? As a seminary committed to the liberation of the oppressed, we stand on the prophetic indictment of Isaiah. Woe unto them that make unrighteous decrees, to turn aside the needy from judgment when power is asserted, the shadow of the military presence rather than the consent of the government. The sacred covenant between public authority and the people is canceled. To the representatives of our city and our state and the city, to the people who are doing the work on the ground, we recognize that Chicago is not a war zone, and our neighborhoods are not combatants. Justice demands that we refuse to surrender our humanity to the rule of force. We press toward today in the power of the Spirit, seeking that the city where justice flows like waters and righteousness, a never failing stream. We ask that we remember that we're doing ministry today. We ask that our ancestors prayed for this day, and you are the answer to those prayers. Welcome to this Truth Telling Commission.
And now, Reverend Damian Durr, the General Secretary of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. And that sounds real good. Come on, Brother Ben.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We gather this morning, obviously, with the fresh residue of the King holiday still in the air. And of course, Dr. King's 17-year-old granddaughter, Yolanda Renee King, said that she appreciates the commemorations and appreciates the celebrations that are in honor of her grandfather. But what she also said was that she is committed to, along with being in community with those who are committed to fighting for what he stood for and standing by those who continue to find themselves navigating regimes of oppression, dehumanization, and marginalization. So she says, while raids are wonderful, she said her, as well as those in her age demographic, are committed to continue to pursue justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. And of course, as we gather in this unique city, as she stated, she knew her grandfather as a truth teller, a prophet, as well as a justice seeker. We gather in a city that is known for producing truth tellers, justice seekers, and prophets. We gather in the city of Chicago that reminds us of the transformative and truth-telling work of Ida B. Wells Barnett, one who was willing to put her life on the line to highlight America's toxic political engagement in lynching Black bodies. We gather in the city where Chairman Fred Hampton was murdered and slain, as this year marks the 60th commemoration of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. And then, of course, we gather in this city of truth-telling, prophetic utterance, and justice seekers, the home of Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright. one who has been and continues to be a truth teller, offering a counter narrative in the midst of narratives that seek to other folks, that seek to marginalize folks, and that seek to minimize the agency and human dignity of so many. So, of course, as been said, this is a work of ministry, and we look forward to that which God will share in this time, and we look forward to the ways in which the Proctor Conference will continue to share these testimonies, share these reflections, as hopefully this truth that will be shared here today will continue to serve as a light and a lamp for paths of liberation and transformation. Thank you so much for being here.
I want to pick up a bit on the spirit of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and there are many words of wisdom that we heard this past week. Words and his acts of courage embedded in those of us who are the generation who remember. We have an obligation to model that remembrance, to make sure that our children's children know the story. I want us to especially remember his prophetic pronouncement that unless America had a values revolution, it would drown in the triple demons of materialism, militarism, and racism. The center at McCormick Theological Seminary and the center here, as well as the mission of the Proctor Conference, is fully committed to be a leader, facilitator, and a part of this values revolution. We are all living the experiences of state-sponsored and rapid erosion of democratic values and practices. On the cusp of a 250th year commemoration of the nation's founding, rather than seeing efforts at a more perfect union based upon principles of justice and equality, a welcoming spirit to immigrants, parenthetically, Jesus was an immigrant, and those fleeing oppressive regimes, we see just the opposite, including federal militarization of our community streets, the banning of our diverse histories, and efforts to inscribe, incarnate, and normalize a hierarchy of human value birthed in a white, male, hegemonic, and white religious nationalism, clothed under a banner of Christianity. Project 2025, the less known Project Esther, plans unapologetically to detail and implement this agenda. Much damage has already been done, and not just by one person, let us ever be mindful of that, but teams of persons who are committed to an America tail spinning in King's racism, classism, and militarism. It was in October when we saw the ominous signs of a gradual military takeover of our communities that the imperative for a truth-telling commission was something that we could do to answer the question of what next. It became clearer and clearer that Chicago was ground zero for the experiment and really a test of federal normalization, of militarization of American communities. The demonization, the ostracism, the divisive politics, and the language of white national take-back under this banner of Christianity and Make America Great Again evidenced all the signs of authoritarianism, race-based ethnic cleansing, and removal of targeted populations by any means necessary. The terror has spread from coast to coast, and the inevitable killing of a white American woman in Minneapolis has awakened a sleeping giant. The spread of this diabolical threat to a vision for democracy is happening in large cities and small ones, wherever those labeled as undesirables are living in community. To attest to the assault and the counter resistance in Illinois, the Illinois Attorney General's office has already filed 51 lawsuits. in such a short time. 51 lawsuits. We'll hear more about this, I'm sure, today, because he will be joining us. The bullying, the threats, the irrational moves of power is also happening with a profound rippling impact on the geopolitics, the health, and the economies of the global community. From Chicago to Minneapolis to Portland to Greenland to UN and NATO. So those of us who have long been on the receiving end of this kind of injustice hope and pray that this is not a mere moment of shock, but rather not being a moment of shock to an uncomfortable situation that is being normalized. We hope and pray that this is a watershed moment that bears the marks of a transformative movement, a movement of God's hand for such a time as this. I do believe that to be so, we have to be still enough to be able to read the signs. And I can attest that as this planning evolved over the past few months, God showed up only as God can do in unexpected ways. 2 nights ago, many of you probably saw Rachel Maddow told the story of Ruby Sales, civil rights icon whose life was spared by a white Episcopal seminarian who took the bullet for her in Lowndes County, Alabama. It was a watershed moment 60 plus years ago, and if you look at our sponsor list, you will see her name and organization because I have been talking to Ruby practically every other day as we move through this process. She is a sponsor of our gathering here. But God, we sit in a Catholic seminary, housing 2 other seminaries, and just a few days ago, profound statements of calls of action and witness and breaking of the silence were given by bishops of both Catholic and Episcopal churches, saying we must assume the moral positioning against tyranny, amplify our voices, and be ready for martyrdom. Be ready for martyrdom. Cardinal Kupich called it bringing our moral authority to witness. And that is why we are here today. God has called us to be here to demonstrate our moral outreach, our outrage, and to make our faithful demands as people who believe in the humanity and dignity of all people. As our planning took shape, we decided to name this commission the HART Commission, H-A-R-T, Human Rights, Anti-Authoritarianism, Reparatory and Restorative Truth-Telling Commission. HART, yes, but also HEART, H-E-A-R-T, because America is on life support, being propped up by the sheer power of demonic and despotic leadership who values lying, self-indulgence, and bullying as the roadmap to a prosperous and peaceful America. So if we're going to get out of this profound crisis and watershed moment, we in this room know that America needs a heart transplant, a winning revolution of values built on justice and righteousness. We are indeed at a crossroads. So I'm privileged to call this HART hearing in order in Chicago, because in the words of South Africa's presider over the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Bishop Desmond Tutu, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And we call this HART hearing in order in the words of our beloved ancestor and activist Ida B. Wells, who proclaimed, the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. We have curated and created this sacred space for the hearing and the listening, the testimony and the witnessing, the lament and the hope. Our chapel is next door, awaiting any who are led to moments of solitude and further discernment. Now that we have established we are here for a movement willing to name, confront the demon within, a movement that requires resistance, repair, reparations, and restitution and reconstitution in the name of all that is holy. Let me turn to the format of this witnessing. Over a 2-day period, those who testify will be asked to read or share for up to 10 minutes and then engage in an open 20-minute Q&A with esteemed commissioners. Because of time constraints during the hearings, testifiers have also been encouraged to share more of their narrative in writing, and those submitted documents will also be provided for the record. Our commissioners represent a diverse background and expertise, all concerned about what is happening in this nation. Every effort has been made to garner a diverse group of testifiers, but we must make a note of the extent to which intimidation and fear has impacted a people's willingness to share their stories in public. And we have to appreciate that regardless of our agenda. The desire is there, but the emotional and financial capacity is wanting. The knowing you might be putting your friends, your loved ones, entire families in harm's way if you dare to say a word. Being snatched out of cars and daycare centers, shot in cold blood has successfully triggered fear, xenophobia, and divisiveness. For our leaders and public servants, being on 24-hour call also limits their capacity to sometimes be present. So we can't be judgmental of others. We know not what they are doing on behalf of all of us. Therefore, know that the disclaimer, the program is subject to change because of the various nature of the struggle. We're also joined by a group of those we call observers and justice advocates and activists who will help us amplify the message. They represent a cross-section of organizations who are engaged in the struggle to preserve principles of democracy. All proceedings are being recorded and will be transcribed. Our editorial team will be led by Dr. Michael Bennett, economist, sociologist, and community economic development expert, Professor Emeritus DePaul University. The commission will issue its findings. It will synthesize them as a public policy report, and they will translate those recommendations into educational materials and programs for broad civic engagement and education. Now, before I take my seat, I want to officially acknowledge our donors, and the program partner, Nehemiah Trinity Rising, Ruby Sales, and Spirit House, the reparations actions, and the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. I want to acknowledge the seminaries and our commissioners for the time you have taken to support this, and certainly those who testify for the time they have taken to share their story. We have asked this morning that the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III serve as the chair, the presiding chair of this morning panel, and he has agreed graciously to do so, though this was not unknown to him. We are expecting Teresa Cardova as well to join us, and there are some commissioners we invite you to please take your seats at the table now, who are presently in the audience. At the end of the day, we hope to be stronger because we know all of our humanity is dependent on our being able to see and acknowledge the humanity in others. May it be so. And now I turn it over to Dr. Reverend Otis Moss III, Senior Pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ and known all over the world.
Thank you, Dr. We're grateful that all of you are gathered here and those who are watching online, and for those who will be looking at this recording of this presentation. At this point, we are going to have at this moment in our first testifier at this time. And I'm going to ask that Stacey Davis Gates would come forward at this moment. as she is the president of the Chicago Teachers Union and will be sharing about the impact on labor and the impact upon children as a result of what we are witnessing nationally.
There you go. Thank you. Try to run two things. I'm trying to respect your time. So I'm on my phone, so I can see the clock. Cause I understand it. Figure this out.
Thanks.
So good morning.
Good
morning.
My name is Stacy Davis Gates. I am the president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers and the Chicago Teachers Union, where I represent over 100,000 high school, early childhood, and elementary school teachers, paraprofessionals who are school assistants, teacher assistants, school clerks, restorative justice coordinators, social workers, school counselors, school nurses, and other support staff. I want to acknowledge that I am honored to sit before all of you today to provide what I perceive as very valuable testimony. As a high school history teacher, it is the transcripts of convenings like these that help students that I have taught and students that are being taught in this moment, the parallels of this moment. I also want to acknowledge the fact that it feels very safe in a room with people who are believers and understand the power of belief and faith. It also feels good to be in a room with people who understand the significance of our history, our collective history in this world, but in particular in this country. So one thing that I'm gonna do is hopefully ground my testimony in the parallels of this moment. And number one, I hear a lot of people speaking ahistorically about what we are experiencing in this moment. We are experiencing a very American debate that we have had every generation, quite frankly, in one form or another. The debate that we are currently engaged in this country feels more violent because it includes more people. But I would submit that the violence that is being felt across this country and across this world, quite frankly, is not just American, but it is a violence and a trauma that Black Chicagoans know very well. If you understand our history in this great city, you understand that Pullman Porters delivered a newspaper to places like Sunflower County, Mississippi, where my paternal branch is from, that encouraged their escape of Jim Crow, not fascism. We called it Jim Crow, we called it lynching, we called it black codes, we called it literacy tests, we called it poll taxes, we called it convict leasing, terrorism, process, the Ku Klux Klan, sheriffs. When I think about Renee Good, I think about Viola Liuzzo from Detroit, a white woman murdered during the Selma campaign. But if we think that this is about Nazis and European fascism, we'll never understand both our responsibility to tell our stories and our responsibility to call people to something greater. And I would submit that it is more important, particularly in Chicago, now more than ever. Number one, because they told us that they will be back in the spring. Number two, Black people have been invisibilized in the retelling of this terrorism in ways that are demobilizing, especially for an organizer like myself. When you get into fights, you have to bring all of your people. So I would submit that the work that you're doing here today is not just landmark, but it is critical in the survival of this democracy and in the protection of our young people and the work within this city as well. So thank you. Thank you very much for convening this. So my name is Stacy, and I'm a high school history teacher. And as a high school history teacher, I know that workers matter. Because workers have been very clear about how they leverage their labor in order to help create democracy and an expansion of that democracy. Because the democracy that we have now is a democracy that my enslaved ancestors created when they walked off of plantations during the Civil War. History, retold wrongly, tells us that the Emancipation Proclamation did that. But W.E.B. Du Bois and Black Reconstruction tells us that our ancestors left plantations and it crippled the Confederacy that we are being reminded of in this moment. Right? They lost the means of production, so it broke their backs and disabled their forces. At the same time, enslaved Africans who walked off these plantations walked on to Union armies, and they fought side by side with soldiers from the North to rejoin our country. But that isn't the story. The story is after the war, when these people, allied with white abolitionists, allied with Black abolitionists, and led by women, Harriet Tubman, these people put forth a demand of this country. And the demand was public education, public health, public housing. In fact, with the Freedmen's Bureau, the creation of it in the South, which housed all of these spaces, you also get your first DEI program. White women teach Black children in the South. You have to tell very powerfully how workers are important in this moment, and how Black people are courage and our commitment to this idea of liberation and democracy is critical for our collective survival. Before you get ICE, you have John Burge on the south side of Chicago kidnapping Black men and separating them from their families and putting them in the prison industrial complex. We've had these occurrences before. So in order to mobilize, it is incumbent upon all of us to tell the truth transparently and specifically about our American history. Ignoring that demobilizes and marginalizes our ability to see ourselves through this moment. And I know that it is critical we do that because of the impact being felt in our school communities. When Trump was president back in 2016, we began to see a decline of student attendance, especially in areas where Latinx families lived and in immigrant communities, because in Chicago, immigrant communities also include Black people too, Asian people too. And so we began to understand the decline of that attendance. Families were scared. So when we went to the negotiating table in 2019, we took our students and those families, and we negotiated the sanctuary clause in our contract, which mirrors a lot of the language
in the ordinance that has been passed and implemented and enforced, I might add, in the city. What that helped us to do was to create capacity within a very big bureaucracy to train people on their rights and how they exercise those rights to protect young people, right? We used our collective bargaining agreement to create the capacity to protect people. What has ensued thereafter is something that I think is worth noting. We have sanctuary teams in our school communities. People are trained to figure this out. And yet, we still have families that have to create walking school buses to get children back and forth. We have mutual aid societies that are forming to make sure the groceries are delivered, that homework is picked up. Because even with the walking school bus, I have members everywhere, from East Aurora to Franklin Park to the Pilsen community who are afraid to leave their homes. It is the coalitions, the sanctuary teams that help to make it a little bit better. What does that mean? It means when these people come back, that my members at Funston Elementary School who were tear gassed, my members at Washington High School who were tear gassed, are going to have to figure out how to do two things: educate our children, support their families, and try to keep everyone safe. And I would submit that that might be impossible if we don't figure out how to organize ourselves, not to brace for impact, not to hold each other after we see images of children zip tied outside an apartment in the South Shore neighborhood, but to figure out how to resist. And I would submit that workers are going to be key to that. And in order for that to work, the education of this moment has to be retold in the dimension in which we've experienced it. So you're going to need teachers and unions to make that work. So we're willing as partners to do a few things: invite you into our work and keeping young people and their families tethered, connected, and supported in the school dynamic. And two, as workers, create the leverage and the opportunity to do what our ancestors did and to secure and expand democracies. You don't get the 13th, the 14th, or the 15th Amendments without their power, without their organizing. And I have to reiterate that that work was done in coalition, that was multi-generational, and that was multiracial, and that was also led by women. So for as much as this is a retelling, they tear gas folks, our attendance goes down. Children come to school traumatized, much like the trauma that we've experienced with Black children who wanted cops out of CPS. Because the research says better attendance, safer experiences, parallels. So we want restorative justice coordinators and social workers and nurses. Same thing we're gonna want for our students who are experiencing this moment as well, but bigger, because all of our families need that. These children leave their homes and they go back to communities and they go back to neighborhoods. These communities have been traumatized. So we're just calling on you to do a few things with us. Join us in sanctuary at your local neighborhood school. Number two, invite our workers to participate in the strategies and in the policy creation of how we survive and expand and get over this moment, right? Expand to justice, but get over the injustice, just to be clear. And then finally, how do we together resist? It is not enough to wipe tears. That is not our function. I became a teacher to prevent on the front end the injustice. I didn't become a teacher to walk them to the counselor's office after the injustice. So I invite everyone here and in this city to think about what it means to shut our city down from injustice and tyranny. I'll take questions now, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to open it up to our commissioners for the questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, I want to say first of all, thank you so much, for taking the time and the attention and also for delivering, one of the most profound and necessary Black History Month lessons in advance for February. So I look forward to sharing it with some of, my apprentices, high school students who also need to hear that history. Just a quick question, Dr. Vicky Casanova Willis. I am really honored to be a part of this convening, having participated as, both a jurist for some international tribunals. My work is in the human rights, international, but local human rights arena. And my question is, also as one of the authors of the Verge torture curriculum, I guess. My question is how can communities, organizations, individuals be helpful in advancing the things that you are so clearly outlining that need to happen both now and next? Specifically thinking through how to put things in a human rights context. As we are helping redefine things for us and the position you're doing and talking about the sanctuary city work, which can be extended to really understand human rights cities and remedies as well. So I'm just wondering how, in a tangible way, if you have thought through, or certainly teachers, members of your walking school bus, I love and work, have thought through how we can both protect, but also continue to move forward at all ages to prevent the backlash that continues to grow. Thank you.
Great question. First off, thank you for your work on the commission. We negotiated the reparations one curriculum into our contract. And we fortified that, well, that was, I think the 16 contract. And then in 25 last year, we codified it with academic freedom. I would submit that that is a difficult curriculum to get into some of our classrooms. And especially in the classrooms in the parts of the city that are suffering the most right now. Those are neighborhoods that have a strong first responder residency. And many times that curriculum is wrongly characterized as anti-first responder, instead of a lesson of how we don't repeat the past. And I would submit that having some sort of support, roundly spoken about that curriculum and how it is tied to this moment. As you know, we have a school board that is half elected, half appointed. And I know that the mayor of Chicago will be here. These are all things that we get to push on those elected leaders as well. And we'll continue to push that. But in terms of resetting this, I think that there are a number of educators right now. Teachers for Social Justice comes to mind right now about how they are creating opportunities for professional development and curriculum curation to educators to meet this moment. That curriculum is often connected. We do something very similar in our professional development wing of our union. It is called the Quest Center, but where we are trying to create more culturally competent educators in this moment is really calling, screaming for more capacity. I hope that was responsive.
Thank you.
I think this is the most powerful historical analysis we've heard from an educator. And I think that is important. My question is, how do we take what you have just shared very briefly and replicate it throughout the city and throughout the state? Because I think many of the parents, faith leaders, don't know what you know. And as I was thinking about the Children's March in Alabama, it's almost time to recreate something like this. So what do you think? How can we help you do what you're trying to do across the state?
Well, I think it's coalition. I believe very strongly in the power of those. They are very difficult to participate in and absolutely necessary. One, you as a commission should give directives. I am a firm believer in giving out homework. You should tell the Illinois Federation of Teachers and the Chicago Teachers Union to create a curriculum that responds to this moment and that connects it to the local histories throughout Illinois. And you should expect us to do it. You should tell the Chicago Public Schools that you want to see how their curriculum and their standards are aligned to help people meet this moment as well. And you should invite them to be challenged in that. We would support both things. I think number two, you said, oh, gosh, I was trying to short it down. So that's what I think you can do there. I think again, going back to the reparations one curriculum, that also should be underscored and highlighted, especially in Chicago, especially to deal with this idea that this isn't quote our fight. If you are more melanated. So I think that matters in this moment as well. Is that responsible, Dr. Wilson?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And just piggybacking off of Dr. Wilson's question, I wanted to inquire about the best practices that you have shared with other cities and communities outside of Chicago, and if there are other communities outside of Chicago that you gleaned from to help to build your models, best practice. And also with the threats to remove funding from sanctuary cities, are you able to share just proactively some of the approaches that you all have in place to continue this work, even at the threat of loss of funding?
I remember, and your question does speak to it. So, Dr. Middleton, what I would tell you is number one, we're going to have to figure out what the coalition is to meet them at the airport. I don't know how to deal with a bully, both as a student and a teacher. It was the same experience. As a student, you can't keep stepping on my foot and you can't keep pushing me around. So I have to respond to that. And the response rightly has to escalate. Number two, I think it is important for us to understand that it has to be every sector and it has to be everyone. And then we also have to understand the history of it. One of the things that Reverend Jackson has been very good about retelling that lives in me is that when they went from place to place, the room was smaller than this. Everything wasn't Selma. Everything wasn't Washington. There were smaller spaces, and so we have to become comfortable with the reality of what resistance does look like in dimension. That there are big moments, but there are many more moments, and this is a moment. And the meetings and the classrooms that we go to next will be a moment. Invite us to your pulpits, invite us to your organization. And I'm not just saying the people who are elected to lead these unions, but the people who are blessed to teach our children. Invite them and hear their stories. Invite them to your pulpits. Invite them to your meetings and communities. Because what they will tell you is that this is the hardest that they have had to deal with. Because not only do they need their union contract to protect them to get the wages and the benefits and the common good, but their jobs. Because they are in the crosshairs of this First Amendment debate we're in again in this country. And that's not just in Texas, that's also in the Chicago public schools, make no mistake. I deal with these issues. And so reaffirming our commitment of academic freedom for people to call a thing is another thing that we're gonna have to do together because teachers are up under it. and the trauma of right now and how you live it as an individual and deal with it as a worker and also deal with it as a leader, as a nurturer and as an instructor. The complexity of that is heavy. So when you see one, give them a hug and say thank you and appreciate them a little bit because it's really hard. I think also this idea of what's being extracted from us. As you all know, Chicago is a donor city to the state of Illinois. For every dollar we send back, we get about 60 some odd cent back here, right? So we subsidize the state of Illinois, much like the state of Illinois helps to subsidize the United States of America. I know we only get 63 cents on the dollar back from the feds, and even that is being marginalized. You've seen the stories, after school programs. We're suing through the A&T right now to restore that. You're also seeing the dismantling of the Department of Education. This is the richest cabinet of billionaires to ever run this country in the history of this country, right? And so they are defunding the public good in order to finance the war on Minneapolis. The same one that they are roving around the country and have promised to return to our neighborhoods. Funding is critical. And so what the ask is we're gonna have to figure out how billionaires and the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois who got a tax break from Donald Trump can put a little bit more into the pot right now as we all try to survive the moment where our after school programs are disappearing, where healthcare is going to be marginalized, where children who are already hungry are gonna come back hungrier, and our school breakfast and lunch programs are imperiled by the whims of this administration. This is an all hands on deck moment. Just because we haven't already doesn't mean that we cannot right now. So I would say that our governor, our Speaker of the House, and our Senate President are gonna have to be unprecedented in their leadership of this moment. Everyone is gonna have to. My leadership is gonna have to be unprecedented in this moment. I'm gonna have to tell my members, what is democracy and safety and support for your young people worth? Is it worth sitting down? Is it worth standing up?
Thank you so much for your testimony today. We appreciate you and the work you're doing across the state, not just the city. As we prepare for a transition, I see that President of McCormick Theological Seminary is with us, Dr. Maisha Handy. We're so grateful that you're here. If you could just give a few remarks, we just are grateful for you hosting and sponsoring the event today.
Good morning. So good to see all of you on today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience with my schedule. I'm gonna have to be in and out today. Dr. Iva, who we affectionately call Mama Iva, has known this for a while and was willing to accommodate my schedule. I can't say enough. First of all, welcome. I know you've been welcomed already by Reverend Dr. Derek Grace. But welcome to McCormick Theological Seminary. That is hosting space for this event, and the Center for Reparatory Justice, Transformation, and Mediation is one of the centers of McCormick. I can't say enough about how important it is to gather for this truth-telling commission in a time when we are almost beyond cultural erasure. In the fight against that, we are dealing with the evil onslaught not only against American citizens, but against absolutely anybody, anywhere, at any time, under any circumstances. We are dealing with the brutality of ICE agents. We have students in this building who have to fear for their lives when they walk outside of this door. And so it's so important that we take time to speak our truth. And as we often say, to tell the truth, even if we do it scared. Amen. Somebody, it's a quiet room. When I was a student at Emory University, Archbishop Desmond Tutu was there as a professor, visiting professor, and I had the honor of serving as his teaching assistant in one course, and then as his teaching associate, teaching a course with him after that. And he would always remind us that the TRC in South Africa was not a cookie cutter model or methodology, and that one size does not fit all. And even as we understood that, he also emphasized the importance, though, of having folks come and testify and speak their truth, tell their truth. As we know, that was very different than the outcomes of Nuremberg. But what we do now, what you are doing now, has important implications for our future and for the day when that arc of the universe bends towards justice. So thank you for being here. Thank you for those who push the arc and make it bend towards justice. I don't want to start calling names, but Reverend Dr. Otis Moss, I said, I know that voice. Who's talking right now? Thank you so much for being here, Father Flager. Just always a blessing to be in your presence. Reverend Brown, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson, who's known me since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. Thank you all so much for being here. I'll be back. I have a meeting at 11 to 2. I'm hoping it doesn't last that long, but I most certainly will be blessed to be in your presence the next 2 days, and we are honored to have you here to tell the truth, our truth, the truth that needs to be told. Thank you.
Andy, we're going to take a 5-minute transition break so that we can prepare for our next testifier at this time. If you need to take a bio break, you can run, we'll come back. You got 5 minutes. We're going to start again.
Well, we tried. I usually. Here's my after say. Yeah, this guy, please, this is long. I can take care of yourself. The neighbor says.
Thank you.
Then you go straight to the comments, straight into the inquiry, so I'm saying I'm just sure. But I'll go straight out.
Right?
That's why I'm taking. Oh, yeah, I'm taking and through here. You have to do.
The next paragraph, right here. And then I take a look. I have to do.
Oh, he's.
That's an amazing man for you.
I get to have a post. Yeah. Then it's going out there all the time. I'm not sure. She can hold. I see how so. Yes, sir.
It's over. It's yeah, I heard me talk about. Yes. And celebrations and profit is. Fair, so this is profit, you know, you have to talk about, this is about profit. Trailblazing leader, a raw coalition. So, you know, so these things, and he is an extraordinary preacher, teacher. Kid, what he's not in church right now. I was listening to
How are you doing?
I'm glad to meet
Begin in 4 minutes. 4 minutes.
No, I'm even like. You're right. So nice to meet you. Oh, no, we are on the north side, yeah. Right on that.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
It's scary.
Oh, real? I thought it was such a pleasure to meet you.
So I'm just.
Let's go ahead and slate.
To change the shot.
Yeah, he's gonna come with the coffee. Should be coming in a second.
Okay, so this guy.
Yes.
Focus on him, 'cause the other shot, all of them, just those.
It was, yeah, and you were saying I kept educating my friend.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had to reframe it. I know you said don't reframe it, but I had to.
Yeah, no, that's the system. Go with your, that's great, that's instinct. But you're saying on the left side, you see me on the left side.
Yes, yes, it's very interesting in that.
So in between the chair and that tripod seat.
Right.
Okay, so
I mean-
I'll stay on this side.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, okay.
But you can just keep them the same.
Again, we are going to ask for our second testifier to come forward. Bishop John Michael Del Rio, you come forward, Bishop, and bring forward a testimony at this time. John, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and I find it a great privilege and honor to be before you today. And especially within this truth-telling session. I will be very truthful and frank. Had you asked me 2 years ago, I would have had different political ideology, and I would not be before you today. But I am so thankful for this panel, this commission, because now I look at each and every one of you, your work, your sermons, articles, books, as encouragement to be before you today and to be a voice for those who cannot be in the room today. I come before you not as a politician. I come before you as a pastor, a bishop, a witness, and a voice for the marginalized. And what is happening right before our very own eyes. I cannot tell anybody else's story, but I can tell you what I have seen with my own eyes. I can tell you the stories that I have heard with my very own ears. And I want to first begin where truth hit me. I'm a former educator, Spanish teacher, high school. And when things began to happen with rhetoric of mass deportations and stuff like that, if I could be very frank, I ignored it. I said, that could never happen. We're the United States of America. That could never happen in our country. And so we blew it up. We saw it happening in California, blew it up. It's not happening here. We saw it happening in Texas. That's over there. That's not here. Until it came knocking in on our door. I had an advanced Spanish class of 5 students. And they were all native Spanish speakers with parents who were immigrants. And that morning, the students were not their usual high school energy self in that class. And I finally said, guys, what's happening? What's going on? What's up? What's wrong? And one of the students, she raised her hand. And with her voice shaking and tears running down her face, she said, ICE is in our neighborhood. What do we do when they knock on our door? And if I could be very blunt, I did not know what to do. This is my first time in social justice. I'm brand new to this. The seminary I attend, they lit a fire of social justice in my heart, and I have been studying and I have been reading many of y'all's works. And at that moment, I had no clue what to answer because prayers and thoughts was not going to be enough. Prayers and thoughts was not going to stop ICE from knocking and pounding down their doors. Prayers and thoughts was not going to change the situation. I went to my principal, I went to my administrator. I said, I don't know what to do. I feel helpless at this moment. And so I asked if I could do a little bit more digging, and they said absolutely. And I began to call immigration lawyers, and they all told me the same thing. They said it needs an act of Congress, there needs this, there needs that before, and there's hundreds of thousands before they get and trickle down to the neighborhoods. it'll never happen. And the scary part is, every time I have heard the words, it'll never happen, it has happened. Now we are at a point of this pinnacle moment in our government. You see, what struck me and what breaks my heart about the situation is those students I'm talking about, they weren't worried about themselves. They were not being selfish and worried. They heard conversations they were not supposed to hear. What were those conversations? Parents, as they were cooking, making survival plans for what were to happen. They didn't realize the children were hearing it, but they did. And so they came into my classroom. They didn't have questions of, what am I going to wear to prom? They didn't have questions of, what movie am I going to see next week? Their questions were, what am I going to do if mom doesn't come home? Their questions were, what am I going to do if dad is stopped on our way to church? Their questions are, what if I get home and there's no one there to watch over myself and my little siblings? Who will cook? Who will clean? And I wish the next point I was exaggerating. I wish I was making it up for rhetoric purposes. But do you know what happened? Those students, those families had bags packed and ready. They weren't bags of sports equipment. They weren't bags of things ready for a trip, a weekend trip. They weren't for fun. They were emergency bags just in case. Just in case someone was detained. Just in case someone didn't get to make it home. Just in case their lives were torn apart right before supper was served. The children I'm talking to you about, they're not reckless kids. Those 5 had over 30 college credit hours before they even graduated high school. These are not troubled students. But these children are learning fear before they learn hope. These families I'm talking about, they're not criminals. They're not drug dealers. They're cooks. They're janitors. They're caregivers. They're landscapers, they're factory workers, they're churchgoers, and these parents, they wake up early, they work hard all day, they work long hours, they work in rough conditions, they even pay their taxes, and they come home tired, but proud because of an honest day's work. They believe in the promise of this country. They came not to take, but to build. I am what you see before you. When I was born, my father was working in a field. My mom called my aunts to take her to the hospital, and while my uncle went to the field to go look for my dad to let him know that his incredibly handsome son was being born. Okay, that's a little too hard to laugh, y'all. Just let me. But that son of a migrant worker, I hold a PhD. I'm working on a second master's to work on a second PhD in Latine liberation theology. All right. And they came to build. And yet we have turned them into political pawns. Funny, isn't it? We celebrate Taco Tuesday, Margarita Monday, but wait until the restaurant is about to close and detain the same exact people that just served us. We benefit from their labor, but we refuse to see them as people. This is not justice. This is hypocrisy. And it's so interesting. I was at a pizzeria, one of the well-known pizza places here in town, and I was sitting there with a dear friend of mine who was visiting me from Mexico, known for many, many years, and I have never in my life been afraid to speak Spanish. And because he was from Mexico, we were there talking, eating the pepperoni pizza that had just come out, and we were just talking and celebrating, excuse me, life. And then something happened that I thought would never happen. ICE came around the corner from where they were eating it in the same establishment. My heart sank. He was talking to me. I said, shut up and stop talking. He said, what is wrong with you? I said, get up and let's go. Well, that was fear that gripped your heart. Yes, it sure was. Because now I fit the profile. He fit the profile of who they were looking for. They were, even though they were not there for enforcement and they were there to just eat, in that moment, fear entered my heart in a way I wish I could explain it to you. My stomach dropped. My chest began to grow tight. And it was because I didn't know what could happen. I didn't know if staying seated was safe. Nothing happened, thank God. But something had already been taken from me. There is something that is being taken from my community. There is something that is being stolen from my community and their children. And that is hope. They are trying to steal the hope of the immigrants. They are trying to steal the peace and the joy that this country is supposed to offer. And if I, a US citizen, a bishop, a pastor, felt fear simply because of presence, what do you think our immigrant siblings feel every single day? This is the America we are living in now, where fear does not require action, it only requires proximity. Now I speak as bishop. It's interesting, we don't have many churches. We're very ecumenical and we fellowship with churches across the nation. And we have seen attendance decline. Not because people are losing their faith, maybe losing faith in the government, but not in God. Not because people have stopped believing, but simply because they're afraid to leave their homes. One of my churches, they had to go fully online. The pastor showed up and there was no one there. She said, "What is happening?" And because ICE was so strong in that neighborhood, they were scared to leave. Think about that. In our own communities, people are afraid to leave their home. When people are afraid to worship, we're no longer talking about immigration policy. We're talking about human rights, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom to exist without fear. We must stop using immigrants as political pawns, and we have to stop reducing them to just being talking points, and stop turning our immigrant families into leverage, because the cost is too high. Please hear me. The cost is too high. Families are being torn apart right in front of us. There are children that are seeing their parents detained violently right in front of their very own eyes. You're gonna talk about trauma? Communities are shrinking into silence. Fear is disciplining people more effectively than any law ever could. And now, when fear becomes normal, democracy erodes quietly. I want to end, and I'm a preacher, so that's like the first time you'll hear that, right? Something shook me to my core. I was reading accounts of families being torn apart, about government officials busting into doors in the middle of the night and kidnapping people. Children going to school and coming home to no one there. And I thought, poof, mother's gone, father's taken, no warning, no goodbye, no closure. If I'm very honest with you, I thought I was reading something from a historical document, a historical narrative, something from the Holocaust. It was the United States of America 2025 headline. When language of history's greatest moral failures began to describe our present, friends, we are standing at a crossroads. This is not who we are. This is not the America who claims to be. America is supposed to be a place, Chicago, Indiana, we're supposed to be a place where families are protected, not fractured, where children are protected, where they're safe and not trying to survive, strategizing for survival, where freedom is not just a word, but it is a lived reality. Patriotism, friends, is not blind loyalty. Patriotism is moral courage. Patriotism is loving this country enough to stand up and yell and tell the truth when it is losing its way. I don't know what news you have seen, but we're losing our way. Communities. I know a family, they don't even turn the lights on at home so that people will not know that they're there. In America, in Chicago, please let that sink in. We cannot sing about liberty while families live in fear. We cannot pledge allegiance to justice while children prepare for disappearance. We cannot call ourselves free while entire communities are afraid to step outside. The question before us not only is what must stop, but what must be restored. Friends, history is watching us. Children are watching us. And one day they will ask us, as they're listening to this recording and watching it, reading about the findings, they will ask each and every one of us, what did you do when fear became policy? What did you say when families were torn apart? How did you react when America had to choose between power and compassion?
Right.
What did you do? Because silence is an answer. And I want to be able to say, I don't know about you, we chose humanity. We chose dignity. We chose courage. Because the greatness of America has never been in its force, it's been in its conscience. And that conscience, friends, is calling us now. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for your powerful and passionate testimony that many people will be hearing. And I hope that many students in seminary will hear your testimony that you did something amazing. I think this was you dropped a mixtape. Thank you for the beats of liberation that you were playing today. Reverend Waltrina will be bringing the question from our commission, and then we will open it up to the floor.
Thank you so much. I echo those sentiments. We're very grateful for your presence and all that you've shared. My question actually will begin with the last question you raised. What must we do to restore what was stolen? When you started your testimony, you spoke of the stories that you could tell. And then you also gave an illustration of having to stop speaking Spanish out of fear of being profiled. And you lifted up the protracted trauma of the communities that are being targeted. And so I'm curious about strategy for cultural preservation as an act of resistance. When we have so many stories that are being hidden and untold, when we have many aspects of cultural practices being threatened. Hearing your testimony brought to mind the narrative of indigenous communities here in the United States where they were forced to change their names, stop speaking their languages, stop wearing their traditional attire out of fear. It's like so with those who were enslaved and forced into labor here, lose your language, lose your religion. And so reclaiming that has been an act of resistance for these communities. So can you share a little bit about what must be restored from the location of cultural preservation as an act of resistance?
Sure. And I appreciate that question. It's so interesting when it comes to the Latin community, because it has been a battle, if you will, with the language. And I was just reading an article on resistance and how restoring that cultural fully, right, to its pureness in what it was, because from the colonizer, there have been a lot of things that have mixed in. Even now, usually, if it was not below zero outside, I have even stopped within my own practice of using a regular shoe, but I've gone back to the indigenous in Mexico, we call them huarache. They're specific sandals that are used because of it is now trying to take away the demonization of what was pronounced over the indigenous by the colonizer. So even with that, when I was, as I had mentioned, even within our services, my church, we are fully bilingual. Our service is simultaneously in English and in Spanish. And our music director, I had noticed, had stopped doing more, had started to do more English than Spanish. And I was like, well, hey, what's going on? He's like, well, what if they show up? I was like, then we're gonna have to be Paul and Silas at midnight, because there's no way in the world we're about to let, yet again, the colonizer in that thought and mind pattern change even the way we worship God in our faith. So many times that has been demonized. You can't worship. That's not the way we worship. You cannot do those songs. Those are not our songs. And so, to be very honest with you, it in many ways, with strategy, with this whole administration, I could have a strategy, and just by one executive order, I gotta go back to the drawing board, because things that I thought would never happen. I have a great aunt who is 94 years old, and she said, I am seeing things I never thought I would see again. And that was the moment where, it's making people still feel comfortable in that language. Because I have colleagues and parishioners, they won't, when they go out into public, they won't speak Spanish. They'll point, they'll text their children. And we've been trying to work in that way to make them feel safe and comfortable, even within cultural boundaries too, to celebrate who we are. I think that's the greatest thing of America. I think that's the greatest thing of Chicago. Just last week, I was in a little village on a Friday night where there should have been vendors and so many things, and it was a ghost town. I mean, we went to our favorite taco place, and I got a parking spot right away, and that is a miracle where we usually go. You gotta drive around and pray that they don't find you and put a boot on your car, but that's what we've been trying to do.
Bishop, thank you so much for your words, and I'd like to try to maybe see whether or not we can connect the dots with the important and inspiring narrative that you shared. It's a different narrative from others, but there is a similarity that is just tremendous with regard to the history of our country. I think I'm on a history kick because of Stacy and what she was able to share with us over the course of just a few minutes. But I think about think about other people who have suffered as a result of our government. I think about the indigenous people and the Indian Removal Act of the 1840s. I think about our Chinese brothers and sisters and the Chinese Expulsion Act of the 1880s. I think about the Japanese Relocation Act that was at the start of World War II. And in addition to that, we have the institution of slavery. We have a government turning Haitians around in the late 1980s and 1990s and sending them back to Haiti. And of course, we have everything that's going on right now. These narratives are so critical because they're passionate, and the way that you're able to reach the average American, I think, is through stories. And I think that's why we have such great preachers around the table, because you all are storytellers more than anything else. I try to preach theology and can't get an amen, but the stories will go an awful long way. And I'm grateful that you're doing your liberation piece, because Gustavo Gutierrez and James Cone changed my life 40 years ago when I was in seminary. So my question is, with all of these different groups that have suffered at the hands of our government, there is a common link, and I think the link is color. And I'd like to ask you how you think you can connect the narrative of Latinx people and how they're suffering now to all of those other suffering people as well, because I think that makes the story so much stronger.
Absolutely. I think, and you hit the nail right on the head, that it is the color of skin. Because if we truly look at the common denominator, even with right now what was happening, well, if we hear you speak Spanish, there are people that speak perfectly great English that have been detained. It wasn't just because they were speaking Spanish. It wasn't just because they were speaking a different dialect. It right now literally is because the color of your skin. And there are so many that are denying that. And I believe that in order for things to be restored, we have to acknowledge this is what has really happened. I think it is mind-boggling, mind-blowing to me that there are still people that deny the history of our country. To the point that the administration says, well, the Civil Rights Act hurt the white people more than anything else. What in the delusional planet world are we living on? I don't understand. And I think to restore, we have to acknowledge, you know what? It was skin color. If we look down through everything, it's just like the other day, I was within a conversation and the gentleman had asked, well, everyone said, well, everyone should come over legally. And I said, well, when your forefathers came over, did they come over legally? When they were on the Mayflower? And this was his question, and this was his answer. He said, well, there were no governments then. And I think it's sad that people diminish and dismiss the local tribal governments of the indigenous that were already here on this land. And I think that in order for us to even move forward, we have to be on the same page. This really, as much as you may not like to accept it, as much as one may not want to confess it, it happened.
Right.
And it's not just one person's narrative. It's not just one community's narrative. This has happened from generation to generation of different communities. And the sad part is, especially talking from a community of people of color, a lot of times we look at one community and sometimes we say, well, it's better them than us. At least it's them this time, and they'll leave us alone until ICE comes knocking on your door.
Bishop, thank you. The many painful things you've shared with us, and I do feel the pain for your community. It did strike me, being an immigration attorney, when you said you called many immigration attorneys and didn't get answers. So I have two parts. One, I think part of the devastation of our democracy right now is also the devastation of due process of law. Many immigration attorneys are having trauma of their own, not being able to give answers to their community, or to show up at court with everything prepared perfectly and have them dismiss the case and their client being taken away in shackles. You know, how can we work together better as the immigration bar? And also, how can we take your stories so that when the immigration bar tries to advocate for better laws or even just simple due process, we can work together to achieve that end?
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so thankful for the attorneys that I did reach out to. I mean, they were even willing to come to the school and do seminars. They sent me an email of the cards of rights for people to have and for us to give if needed. And when I went to them, when they talked to my administration, my principal and my administrator, they assured me, they said, if ICE shows up, they're not coming into the school. We have to develop process and stuff like that. And I assured the students, and that was my goal, so that they could go to school in peace. At least some of them, okay, they may not want to be in school, but at least they would be in peace. And so I say that because I felt bad for the lawyers, because everything that they told me legally was true. It was before we began to have, for lack of a better words, a dictator that was trying to move things in his way. And so when I would call it like, hey, this never happens, you know, when they're trying to represent their people in courts and immigration courts, you know, the communication is key between the attorneys. Say, you know what, and they were, hey, you know what, this is what we've been seeing go on, and this is what's happening. Let your people know this, because it was to a point, all of them told me the same thing. If ICE shows up to the door, they do not have to open. They do not have to respond. That was before ICE was kicking in doors.
Right.
That was before ICE started to overstep their boundaries. And so what we're supposed to do, ask, where's your warrant, as they have their tasers and as they're trying to zip tie the person. And I think that to just have that open communication, this is where we're at legally. And I mean, that's where they were at. It was just the sudden switch in law, if I can say, is what has thrown everybody off, because they're like, hey, we don't even know what's happening. We're trying to figure. I think that's where the consistency is at on this side. everyone keeps saying the same thing. We're trying to figure out what is happening. Because we try to figure it out, we try to have a plan, we try to strategize, we try to go forward, and then literally we take 2 steps, boom, we're knocked down, go back. Yes, sir, so, sorry if that was.
We have a question from President Dr. Manisha Handy.
He's my president.
And Bishop today, John Michael, just so proud of you, immensely proud of you, who you are, how you embody our core values, and that was true before today. Bear with me as I set up this question. I've moderated before, Mr. Moderator, and I know when people say, what's the question? I'm a big Kendrick Lamar fan. I am. That was true before the Super Bowl. But I want to center his Super Bowl performance to say what I want to say, as you talked about language and this erasure of language and culture and being faced with the decision to use your indigenous language or not. What I loved about Kendrick's Super Bowl performance is that a lot of people didn't understand it. Or a lot of people didn't want to understand it, right? We heard it. I don't know what he's saying, right? You didn't have to know what he's saying to see the symbolism of what was presented, to see the centering of Black bodies, right? And those stories that were centered in that performance. But I also appreciated that the people that hated on him, right? A lot of which were MAGA and some which weren't, again, saw the American flag, they saw the Black body centered, they didn't like it, but there was a part of me that said, he's not even talking to you.
Yeah.
We're talking to each other. Kendrick is talking to us and reminding us of where we are in our situation, which for me was a manifestation. He tapped into ancestral energy.
Yes.
Our ancestors created coded languages that Negro spirituals, right? That house messages that pointed our people towards freedom. How do you see that happening now in your community, where you can't use this language? Don't speak Spanish in this restaurant. What are the codes?
Yeah.
And I know might be a dangerous question given who's in the room, because you don't want to share your codes out loud. I know we've had whistles blowing and other kinds of things, but how do you see the construction of new coded languages happening among Latina communities?
Thank you, President Handy. And hopefully if I answer correctly, I can still graduate. I'm just kidding. It's so interesting, because even within the Latin community, language has always been our thing. In many forms, and especially for us, it's kind of funny. For us, we talk with our faces. What our mouths and our voices don't say, our face will surely show it. And it's so interesting to see. The other day, when I was in a little village and I went to the bank, one of the tellers that was helping me, she had on her whistle. And the interesting thing was, another teller, we were talking about it, and a lot of us in different Latin communities, we use our mouth, we use our lips. If we're going to point to something, we pucker and we point. So I thought, where's the pen? And we'll go over there, and that's how for the person will know. And we chuckled because in this time, even with the Super Bowl and stuff with Bad Bunny and all that's happening, there are new, well, I shouldn't call them new. They are going back to those ancestral times of what they did in their communication. And I think we're still trying to figure it out because of how new it is to us, how brand new and fresh this persecution is of this community. It's not, I mean, and it's so fresh because when one is being told, well, we're just going after criminals and this and that, but yet they're detaining someone that's on the corner making tamales to sell. Now we have to find new ways of expressing ourselves and to have that language and to begin to have that sense once more. That's what we're working on.
Bishop, thank you so much for your testimony. We're going to take a moment of transition for our third testifier at this time, and I'm going to turn things over to our audio visual folks who have to make some shifts. You can ask one question. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that powerful testimony. To follow up with President Henry said, I'd like to ask, have you noticed any ways in which young people are using their language as resistance to this moment?
We have not, and the reason why is because for the Latin community, Spanish has always been a to some people, if I could use the word downfall, and I'll explain why. Because for many times, or for many years, decades, Spanish was never allowed in public schools. Spanish was never allowed in homes. For instance, in my home, even though my father spoke only Spanish because of the community we lived in, we were forced to only speak English. And so I didn't learn Spanish until I became an adult, and I wanted to learn, and now that I look back, it was actually my form of resistance. And so, but unfortunately, there were so many immigrants that had the thought, if you have a broken accent, you will be judged. If you speak another language, you will be judged. Not realizing that it just wasn't another language, it was the color of skin. And so and that's part of the reason why my church is bilingual, because there are many of the newer generation that does not speak Spanish because of that colonizer mindset that, and if my great aunt Ruth, who was 94, will tell you horror stories of how when she was growing up, they were disciplined, and I'm going to use that word lightly, for speaking Spanish at school, out in public, or just in that kind of a sense. And so we're at a mountain point, if you will, climbing the mountain up, restoring, because now there are many like myself that are waking up and saying, hey, language is a part of my culture. Language is a part of who I am. Language is a part of who my ancestors are. And so not only that, I'm starting to learn the language of my ancestors and their tribe. And so it is, I think that is part of the restoration that needs to be done.
Thank you so much.
I'm going back. That's all that. You go get it 11. Okay, so 57. It's 53 right now. Good on guards? So my plan is so I got probably good about it. Yeah. You good otherwise? Let's see kind of back. Oh, yeah. I was so long.
Just got to note that our next testifier is about 12 minutes out. So you get a second bio break with him.
Right here. I told us about you, she was like, oh, maybe one you need to ask, you know.
Honored
So.
to have, with us to bring your testimony at this time.
No.
In reference to the impact of states' rights and challenges that we are facing across the state and local lines. Attorney Raoul.
Thank you, Pastor Moss. I apologize, I've been absent from church. Begin with honesty, it's continued throughout my remarks. I thank you all for allowing me this opportunity to testify for you. It's been 366 days. President Trump's indiscriminate and unlawful circumvention of the rule of law, wrapped in an inflammatory rhetoric and openly racist agendas, has necessitated a multifaceted approach in my office's efforts to protect the rights and liberties of not only Illinois residents, but residents throughout the country. The rights of businesses and government entities, not-for-profits, higher education institutions, and others. We're going to start with what was our very first lawsuit, which is one that was very personal to me. The Trump administration tried to deny birthright citizenship to Americans born to immigrants. For me, as a child of Haitian immigrants, born to a mother who was not yet naturalized at the time of my birth, I am a birthright citizen. So it's first. The 14th Amendment says in very plain language, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. In response to this debate about birthright citizenship, some have argued the 14th Amendment was intended solely for the children of freed slaves, not for the children of foreign nationals born on U.S. soil. I've fallen into a very tricky position. I'm both.
Yes.
Yes,
indeed. That's right.
I'm a child, descendant of freed slaves, freed in a different way, by way of revolution. Right.
Now, President Trump has latched on to this notion that the 14th Amendment was only meant for free American slaves. They have embraced the notion that the 14th Amendment was a narrow remedial measure designed to address the specific legal and social crisis of slavery's aftermath, rather than a broader charter for federal intervention in state laws. That interpretation, however, both harms our communities by artificially limiting the protections of the 14th Amendment, and also disregards that the equal protection clause of the same 14th Amendment is being weaponized by the Trump administration and others to attack DEI, MBE and WBE programs, access to higher education, and other considerations of race that promote equity. Let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I serve as a co-chair of the Democratic Attorneys General Association, along with my colleague, who's come under the weaponization of the Department of Justice, my colleague up in Minnesota, Keith Ellison. I currently lead DACA's Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Working Group. Along with several other state AGs, I help ensure that businesses, nonprofits, higher education institutions, and other organizations understand the importance of creating and maintaining diverse and legal environments. Last year, the Trump administration aggressively targeted the private sector diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and practices through an executive order entitled Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunity. My colleagues and I stood firm. We issued multi-state guidance to help schools, businesses, nonprofits, and similar organizations understand the legality, viability, and importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and practices. In short, the executive order and related federal executive actions do not and cannot prohibit lawful diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and policies. We should not be intimidated. There is nothing discriminatory or illegal about it. Decades of research and data, as well as the collective experiences of our offices, demonstrate that these types of policies, procedures, and programming help prevent discriminatory conduct and harassment from occurring. They also ensure that unlawful conduct is promptly identified, reported, and addressed when it does occur. Studies and bottom lines clearly demonstrate that diverse and inclusive organizations which prioritize equitable practices tend to outperform their peers. When companies, schools, and other institutions implement programs that effectively promote diversity and inclusion, they help ensure legal compliance, reduce biases, boost morale, promote organization success, and in the business sector, promote profits. President Trump has waged a war against the economically disadvantaged. In the past year, the administration has also made a comprehensive attack on federal benefits that benefit vulnerable families and children. For example, few things are more important than in life than food security. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program helps feed more than 40 million Americans. When the USDA directed states not to issue SNAP benefits last November, claiming insufficient funds due to the government shutdown, we and 25 other states argued that the USDA has access to billions of dollars in SNAP specific contingency funds appropriated by Congress for use during an event like shutdown. We also argued that suspending SNAP benefits is both contrary to law and arbitrary and capricious under the Administrative Procedures Act. As many of you all know, our suit was successful. We obtained a temporary restraining order. Ordering that contingency funds must be made available immediately. According to the Center on Budget and Policies Priorities, more than 62% of SNAP participants are in families with children, and more than 37% are in families with members who are older adults or disabled. Moreover, although more white people are enrolled in SNAP nationally, census data shows that greater percentages of Black and Hispanic people receive these benefits. Approximately 24% of Black people, 17% of Hispanic people, compared to 9.7% of white people, reflecting disproportionate poverty levels. Education. The administration is also working to attack the equalizer, a building block of this country, the education of our children. The total workforce of the department has been cut in half since January of last year. Secretary McMahon has called layoffs the first step on the road to total shutdown of the department, inconsistent with federal law. The administration proposed billions in budget cuts to the department, including slashing funding for after-school programs, teacher training, and student loan forgiveness. It has terminated more than $1 billion in funding for K through 12 schools to respond to the impacts of the pandemic. It has even gone so far as to threaten to terminate funding for K through 12 public schools if states and school districts did not adopt the administration's unlawful views of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm glad to report that as I sit here today, as a result of litigation filed by state attorneys general, the administration's efforts to dismantle the Department of Education is blocked from proceeding. CBP and ICE racial profiling. Last September, the Trump administration sent hundreds of Border Patrol agents and gained on no border and ICE agents in the state of Illinois, reportedly to conduct immigration removal operations. In reality, those agents use of unlawful and violent tactics was designed to coerce Illinois into adopting the administration's immigration policies. These military trained personnel have rampaged through our great city, illegally stopping, interrogating, and arresting immigrants and U.S. citizens, and deploying tear gas in the city's neighborhoods against our law-abiding citizens, including police officers and journalists. We've seen that these tactics by CBP and ICE are not limited, although some may characterize it to be, are not limited towards Hispanic immigrants. They have been enacted against immigrants from Africa, from the Caribbean, and from all over the world. And they are not limited to those who have come to our country most recently. Moreover, they have negatively impacted law-abiding Black and brown citizens disproportionately. If you need to look no further than the military-style raid on the apartment complex in our South Shore neighborhood to see how these tactics impact all of us. Innocent citizens, including children and seniors, were zip-tied and detained. Even off-duty police officers of color in the Twin Cities have been targeted by federal agents looking for proof of citizenship. These are off-duty police officers of color. I, throughout my career, fought against racial profiling, and I'm not going to stop now.
We sued to end the deployment of the Border Patrol and terminate their unlawful tactics which infringe on the sovereignty of our state and city and violate the Administrative Procedures Act time and time again. Another personal one for me is NIH funding. The administration has terminated has tried to attempt to terminate hundreds of millions of dollars across the country for life-saving medical research. We have fought back and have restored much of this funding. But I want to emphasize the turmoil of this past year, personal to me, personal to my staff, personal to one of my residents. I'm a survivor of prostate cancer. This cancer that took the life of my father. Served physician caring for the healthcare citizens on the south side of Chicago 30 years. It also took the lives of both of my grandfathers. Disproportionate impacts Black men. Research has led to better ways of detecting and treating the cancer and other cancers and other men. When I led the lawsuit to protect funding for cancer research and other life-saving medical research that's conducted by our universities and research institutions, it was indeed personal. National Guard. Americans, regardless of where they reside, regardless of who their governor is or who their mayor is, should not live under the threat of occupation by the United States military. President cannot go beyond the authority granted by Congress to deploy the National Guard, and there has been no emergency or justification for requiring a militarized response to anything going on in the city of Chicago or anywhere else. The president's action in Illinois were never about federal government being unable to do their job, but through normal channels. This has been about the unconstitutional desire to take the unprecedented action of punishing certain American cities by militarizing. Accordingly, my office immediately filed suit to stop the president's unlawful and autocratic actions. And within days, we won a temporary restraining order in the district court. Important in that order and going off the grid. And I'll encourage all of you all to take time, you want to be a lawyer, to actually read Judge Perry's order. Because she goes back to our nation's founding. She refers Federalist 29, where the delegates were arguing about how much power to give the federal government over our state's militias. And we've gotten to know them, know him through the stage musical Alexander Hamilton. Who was an advocate for broad federal power, responded to those delegates. Well, that's preposterous. It's impossible that any president would send a militia of one state into another. This was discussed by the delegate. It has happened. We are there. Fortunately, our Supreme Court in the 6-3 ruling agreed with us. In addition to our streets being prevented from being militarized by the National Guard, there was another hidden nugget, another hidden victory in a footnote in a concurring decision by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, where he backtracked from a prior opinion where he greenlit racial profiling in immigration stops. In footnote 4. Perhaps because they came to be known as Kavanaugh stops. And backtrack on that position and said it was unlawful for these stops to be made. Basis of race or language. In the United States, the rule of law ensures that the Constitution's bedrock principles of separation of powers, state sovereignty, democratic accountability, due process, and equal protection under law that can be relied upon. The rule of law that keeps order and protects the people of this country from harms only works if all of those who swear to uphold our Constitution and laws abide by them. We have a president who admitted on national TV, who responded on national TV when asked whether he has to follow the Constitution, that he doesn't know whether he has to do so. Then he's not a lawyer. Yet the first thing that I did when I was elected, and every elected official did, was raise my right hand, swear to uphold the Constitution. African Americans and other historically marginalized groups should not have to fear being unlawfully detained by federal officers or any law enforcement. We should not have to fear the loss of citizenship, employment, legal protections, military recognition, or face inequities in healthcare, education, or other opportunities. So we are not giving up. We are committed to the fight. I want to thank you. I commend the work of this commission and urge you not to give up. In our most recent lawsuit in regards to CPB, it wasn't just us lawyers. That lawsuit was enabled by the fact that we collected information from the public at large about the experiences that they endured or witnessed at the hands of CBP Unites. We worked for months. It was filed in one day, but we worked for months on that lawsuit, collecting information, and we will litigate it in protection of our communities. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony. We are going to open it up to the commissioners this time. Questions for you?
General Raoul, thank you for being here and for the fight you're fighting. I don't doubt in any way your efforts to push forward. But we're in a world where the government, the Trump government, doesn't seem to care about legal rulings or anything else. I watched in Sarah Ellis's courtroom what the testimony was and what she ruled, and then what Greg Bovino and his people are doing on the street. And we're moving to a place where I'm not confident that the courts stand back, especially if Trump invokes the Insurrection Act, which seems to be the shibboleth that he's holding over everything. So if the appellate courts don't stand with the district courts, how do you keep the fight going? And do you worry about where this all is headed?
Perhaps I should have started my remarks that we're using the rule of law in the courts and we're winning. I hear the sentiment that comes from your question frequently. And it comes from some adverse rulings and emergency appeals to our Supreme Court. But as evidenced by the National Guard case, not only you have to understand the Texas and the Illinois National Guards were here ready to be deployed to the streets, and they were being held in a suburban facility. Got appealed up, went all the way up to the high court, we won. The federal government was, and people need to understand the gravity of that particular case. And allow me to go into the detail for just one moment, because I think it's really important. In the litigation at the district court level, they just plain lied. They indicated that there was a request from the federal court to protect the courthouse. The chief judge came out, public statement, which is rare, and said there was no such request. They indicated that certain individuals, certain specific individuals, were being harmful and violated law versus ICE officers. And so they arrested and charged those individuals and brought them before a grand jury. The grand jury declined to indict those individuals. Now, there's an old saying that you can indict a ham sandwich. There's been a record number of no bills from grand juries, including when they weaponized the DOJ against my sister AG, Tish James in New York. Our lawsuits with regards to funds that the federal government have tried to freeze coming to the state of Illinois have been successful and has made sure that $6.6 billion that would have otherwise not come to the state of Illinois, just the state, have flowed through to our state. So I understand the concerns about whether or not the federal government will abide by the court, but I've seen evidence that our lawsuits are meaningful and have made a difference. If that has.
Attorney General, first of all, I want to thank you for your leadership and your courage. You have been, I'm so glad you're the Attorney General of the state of Illinois right now. So thank you. The question is that I can't even imagine the enormous cost, both in dollars and resources, to the Attorney General's office. The state, we all know, is pinched for money and for finances. Number one, do you have the resources and the dollars that you need in order to continue to do this, to fight these fights that you just so eloquently said you've won so far? But also, are there corporate law firms in this city and state that are giving pro bono services to help this fight? Because they ought to be. And I just like to know, I haven't heard that they have, but I want to know if they are doing it. And do you have the resources, or what can we do to make sure you have those resources? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I always love answering that question. Let me start by saying, when I took over from my predecessor, Lisa Madigan, I inherited an office. There's an organization called the National Association of Attorneys General. They do a survey periodically, and they did a survey in 2018, the year before I took office, of attorneys general offices attrition. And our office was the worst in the country, in part because inadequate funding of the attorney general's office. This is before the level of crisis that we're facing right now. So before all this, I've been unapologetic about going to my old colleagues in the Illinois legislature and asking for adequate funding so we can do all of the other work. I mean, I spent time talking to you this morning about just the what we call federal accountability work, but we do so much other work to protect our consumers. We just won our first civil hate crimes case. We do public safety work, all sorts of work across the board. People will have an underappreciation of how much work and stuff. So every year I've gone to the legislature and asked for more, and they've listened, but we're not
you know, we're not to the point where I would say we're adequately funded. The philanthropic community has, in Chicago, has responded through an organization called Progressive State Leaders Corporation. We started a fellows program, and philanthropic community has donated to that. It's thus far the fellows program, which is a national program, has deployed 6 fellows to Attorney General's offices, 5 to the Illinois Attorney General's office, because these resources are coming from philanthropic organizations in Illinois. That's been a tremendous help to us. In addition to the 51 lawsuits that we filed, we have filed 100 amicus briefs. What that means is we don't always have standing to file a lawsuit, and there are other organizations that file these lawsuits, and there are law firms that help out with some of those organizations that represent harms to individuals. We don't have standing to represent individuals in lawsuits. So frequently our office is called, and individuals are disappointed because they feel like, we should be their personal lawyers. I want to just speak to one thing real quick, which is not necessarily responsive to your, I mentioned a little bit earlier, both 2 colleagues, Tish James and Keith Ellison. We started our work preparing for this in about April or May of 2024. To characterize it, Joe Biden was still a presumed candidate for president of the United States. We knew at the time there was a risk of having a Trump administration 2.0, and there was a document called Project 2025. We convened as Democratic attorneys general. We dissected that document. We divvied up subject matter, 2, 3 state attorneys general's office each subject. And somebody, I can't say, well, there's one issue that we have not considered. AG protection. We knew the Department of Justice would be weaponized against us personally. We've had AGs have pipe bomb threats to their own. We knew we had to beef up on cybersecurity. We knew we had to turn attention to personal security detail. I think about this every time I go home, lock my door. But despite it's too important. And so I looked up my colleague. Keith Ellison was just recipient of federal subpoenas. Tish James, who they tried to prosecute several times and continue to try to find search ways to prosecute. We know that revenge factor is part of the work that we do. Yet it does not discourage us.
Are corporate firms helping?
Yeah, some, and it's for us, it gets a little bit, complicated because of, just protecting information and so forth. So we can't always just, like some organizations have them, get involved in some of our litigation, which allows me to really highlight the people in my office doing the work. We got lawyers of very high pedigree in the Attorney General's office who could easily be making 2-3 times the money. We've had some people who left the office. They were making more money, came back for this fight. And it's been an emotional toll on those lawyers as well. So if you see somebody that says that they're an assistant attorney general, thank them.
Thank them and pray for them.
Pray for them indeed.
Yeah. Attorney General Raul, I think I speak for all of us when I say we need you to stay in your office and not come to church. We will.
I need some church.
We will send you songs, we will send you sermons for when you can look at them, but we need you to keep going like you're doing, so.
I do log on.
Yeah, that's right. And we certainly all, I think, have been and will continue to be praying for you. My question is related to what started a long time ago with Paula White around this notion of what constitutes anti-Christian. And now we've seen some more action from Noam and Trump around going after people who are considered anti-Christian, which I would say, like, some of you all here at this table will be top of that list based on 5-minute videos and such. So I'm wondering what you all are talking about related to that. And I'm also wondering who are the people who are going to defend those they come after if they do. I'm not certain they will, but they're certainly threatening that. And how you all are preparing for what could be even more interesting times and terrible times.
Yeah, so we are, we stand ready and be prepared for discrimination in whatever form that is. I've talked about some that is in the form of national origin discrimination, racial discrimination, but religious discrimination also falls into that category. As far as no action that I can think of that we've taken that's responded to any such case, at least from the standpoint of state attorneys general. But that doesn't mean that we aren't prepared for that fight, no matter I sit before you as a Christian, no matter who it is aimed towards. And so our membership of state attorneys general is religiously diverse. And so we stand prepared no matter who is named. Attorney Raul, thank you very much for your testimony and taking time on today. And we certainly appreciate your work, and you are bearing witness, and we thank you for what you're doing. We have our next testifier who is with us today, and we're going to take a quick transition. Tariq El-Min will be with us. Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, people just note that we would be remiss if you missed the fact that you're testifying with the Proctor's logo, which is the Haitian warrior loins up, but for freedom and liberation. And so just honoring your heritage and your fight. So thank you, our fight.
Attorney General, one more comment. People have been invoking, family or otherwise, the history, the legacy of our ancestors and this ancestral fight, that this is not new here. And I just wanted to lift up one ancestor among the many who are walking with you, and that is Attorney Standish E. Willis, a dearly departed. We know that you were trained and for such a time as this, and we appreciate the work that you and your colleagues at AGs are doing right now, because it's you all and God that have been standing between what's happening and where we are today. So stand proud. Thank you.
How can we support you, Laura? What can we do to support you?
Well, thank you, trying to keep us on time. That's all. That's my role. I'll be quick. I think one, just as I mentioned in the CBD ICE lawsuit, that's not possible but for regular people having these out recording, being courageous enough to submit what they may have recorded or what they may have witnessed. You're, of course, as I can't remember who asked the question that I was very thankful about resources. The legislature has started their work again, advocacy from regular people in addition to what I will do to beg the legislature. It has been a strain. We've taken people away from other responsibilities to respond to this work and to extend it more than just me is appealing to the Illinois legislature. That is helpful. Sure. Thank you. Thank you, sir. All right, our next testifier is none other than Tariq El-Amin from the Muslim Civic Action Committee, who is going to be lifting up and speaking about Islamophobia along with racial targeting.
Good morning, esteemed members of the HART Truth Telling Commission. It's my pleasure and honor to be here with you to share a few words. My name is Tariq El-Amin. I serve as the resident imam of Masjid al-Taqwa in Chicago's Calumet Heights neighborhood. It's a working class community. We're at 93rd and Escanaba, and I've served this community for almost 15 years now. Our community is a part of the community of Imam Muhammad, whose leadership emphasized human dignity, moral excellence, interfaith cooperation, and service to the broader society. Calumet Heights is a diverse community. I should also mention that I am a board member of Rise Chicago and the Abolition Institute. These are organizations which are committed to protecting workers' rights, human dignity, and the safety of vulnerable communities. Now, with regard to the community, the neighborhood that I serve in, it is a diverse community. African American, white, Latino, Spanish-speaking families, African. There are many undocumented residents from East Africa, Central America, South America, all living side by side. We have different language, culture, faith, but we are shared, or we are connected by our shared humanity and vulnerability. There's a saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and praise be upon him, says the believers in their mutual care, compassion, and sympathy are like one body. If one part of it suffers, the whole body responds with sleeplessness and fever. While that saying comes from my religious tradition, its meaning is universal. When one part of our community suffers, the whole community is affected. My presence here today is not only about my faith, it is about what my faith obligates me to stand for and against. It is about human dignity. On October 14th of 2025, a little bit over 3 months ago, I was part of a rapid response network of de-escalators for community emergencies. One afternoon, I received a call that ICE agents had caused a traffic accident by ramming into a vehicle, forcibly removing 3 young men and deploying tear gas in the neighborhood as community members came out. The mother of one of the young men was present. Neighbors were present. Children were present. Elders were present. By the time I arrived, the agents were gone, but the trauma remained. News crews were there.
Our alderman was there were city officials on site. But that did little to quell the shaken atmosphere and feeling of the residents. What I witnessed at this occasion was not just fear projecting itself as anger. There was a sense of powerlessness and confusion. People were asking, who do we call? Who can help us? What rights do we actually have? We're often told that systems exist not only to ensure that services are rendered, but that they also exist for the purpose of making sure that accountability can be seen, that complaints can be filed, that justice is available to those who pursue it. But in moments like these, that promise feels hollow. For undocumented families, even speaking up in moments like this feels dangerous. And direct action can lead to further harm, so silence becomes a survival strategy. As I looked around and I had a chance to be next to the mother, her grief was visible. Her body emanated shock and disbelief. Her voice carried desperation. And her neighbors shared that pain. When people feel that they have no path to safety, no mechanism for justice, and no assurance of protection, desperation sets in. And desperation is one of the most dangerous conditions for any community. Not because people become violent, because people can lose hope. Now, when I look at the faith community I serve, soon after, members of my congregation began coming to me asking a question: what happens if ICE comes to the masjid? What happens if they show up during Friday prayer? What if they target our worship space? The answer to that, I'm not going to get into here. But Masjid al-Taqwa is a sacred space. It is a place of prayer, a place of healing, a community service, and spiritual refuge. But even that sense of sanctuary has been shaken. The question is not what our response would be. The question is why people now feel unsafe in spaces that should be protected.
Right.
When fear enters places of worship, something fundamental has been damaged. We're in Chicago, a sanctuary city. Now, I want to be clear, Chicago's leadership, we have wonderful leadership here, has rejected the presence of ICE in our communities. Mayor Johnson has flat out rejected it. Our city has said plainly that intimidation and fear have no place here. So the onus does not rest on the city, it rests on the current federal administration and on the forces that have shaped its agenda. An agenda that does not simply enforce policy, but erode safety. An agenda that does not simply pursue law, but cultivates fear. At one time, the word sanctuary carried certainty. It meant refuge. It implied protection. It meant that houses of worship were truly safe spaces, churches, mosques, synagogues, places where people could breathe, pray, and feel human again, where the spiritually wounded could be mended. So what does it mean when our safe places no longer feel safe? What does it say about our moral direction? What does it say about what we value? What we collectively hold to be sacred and worthy of sanctuary? What happens when sanctuary becomes uncertain? Something deeper than policy has been disrupted. We have also witnessed what is happening nationally. In Minneapolis, Black Muslims, both Somali
and African American have been stopped, questioned, and detained. The distinction, or the supposed distinction between who is visibly immigrant and who is native to this land has disappeared. The distinction between Black and Muslim has merged into a single target. There was a recent case circulating on social media of a young female African American Muslim who was a citizen who was abducted by ICE, taken for 2 days, thrown to the ground, receiving facial injuries, lacerations, no redress, no explanation. And there's another account of a young Latino male, 17 years old, who's taken from his job at Target, placed in a vehicle, then dropped off miles away. As he walks into a Walmart, he's on camera and people are asking if he's okay because he's crying. And he says, "I'm not okay." That moment mattered. Because young people rarely admit vulnerability in public. When they do, it means something has been broken. When children say, "I'm not okay," the responsibility falls on us as parents, as leaders, and the entire village. But when the system itself is the source of harm, who do we call? Families are not afraid to go to work, to send their children to school, to seek medical care, attend religious services. Businesses lose customers, neighborhoods become quiet, and trauma becomes normalized. Fear is not the worst thing that can happen to a community. There is a saying in our tradition, from our book, it says that oppression is worse than slaughter. The loss of hope is worse when people no longer believe that their voices matter, when they no longer believe someone is listening, when they stop believing that dignity is possible. That is when the real harm sets in. But naming injustice, it is resistance. The thought, it is the first resistance. And the word is the second. And even when direct action feels dangerous, even when silence feels safer, speaking truth becomes a way of reclaiming hope. Because if I say it, someone might hear it. And if someone hears it, then we are no longer alone. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and praise be upon him, said, "The believers in their compassion and care for one another are like one body. If one part of it suffers, the whole body responds. If one part of our community is hurting, we are all hurting. Immigrant families are hurting, like Muslim families are hurting. Children are hurting, the undocumented are hurting, who are hurting. I'm here to reaffirm what we already know by our presence, that we hear them, their fear is seen, their dignity matters, their humanity is not negotiable. We are one body, and we will not abandon each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, Attorney Craig is going to bring our first questions from our commissioners.
Ma'am, I have 100 questions, so forgive me that if I miss 5 to get to one. Your testimony is incredibly powerful, and thank you for your witness and your community's witness, and the model you're showing in a diverse community to be resistance and then to show hope. I hear stories. I try to think of how ICE and Border Patrol people conduct the violence they do. I hear stories of them telling, I disagree a little with the Attorney General. I call them Kavanaugh kidnaps. Kavanaugh stops is too nice. They're kidnaps, they're abductions, right? but they'll say the Constitution doesn't matter. It's not here. You're alone, right? As an attorney, I hate that, a law enforcement officer saying no Constitution. I also think that many are probably trained in the wars we never should have fought in the Middle East. Fought violence, how to knock down doors, and they come back and can't get work, and they become ICE officers. I mean, how do we take your testimony? How do we talk to those ICE officers and Border Patrol officers? And say, your life's not hopeless, right? And you're better, your power, your word is so powerful, like perhaps you can help me, because I've been trying to think, how is it, as an individual faith, that I can talk to them and say, there is a constitution, there is humanity, and we need to be into that.
Thank you for that question. I think it brings us back, who's the appropriate interlocutor? Right? And community, it is not enough to deliver a word. It must be delivered by a trusted source. So there's none of us who are disconnected that are not a part of some community. So the idea of mutual aid, the idea of reaching out, of establishing connection, a broad connection. We find that there's probably, it used to be 6 degrees of separation, it's probably 2 today. It is possible for that word to reach those men and women who are running around hooded, abusing the dignity, abducting folks for a paycheck, and for a poisonous ideology. So I think it is a matter of using our networks and those who are close to those people to bring that word to them. And hopefully it sparks something in those whose hearts are still open.
Thank you, and just also thank you with Arise, and I know all the galley workers that are scared right now that your work is so important, so my thanks for that.
Thank you.
I had to raise a finger. I have so many questions. I think that's one for everybody, but Imam, thank you so much. You are, well, actually, I think everybody has spoken about the youth, and one of the things that you mentioned about the adolescent, I guess, or who helped us really see the spirit harm, right? As Dr. Wade Nobles characterizes it, the founder of Association of Black Psychologists. So my question has to do actually with, because I work with teens and the cell phones, right? The use that's actually been brilliant, that has helped intervene somewhat in this time. But the risks of the surveillance and, everything else that we know. So I'm just wondering what experience you all have had, as you mentioned, having a very diverse and very targeted community. Is there already an expansion of the Know Your Rights training perhaps that can help talk about the safety with regards to the tracking and profiling and everything that can happen with the phones, even location services, all that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. That's a very important point. And there are a number of organizations that are really front and center on that. ICER is one of them. There's the Illinois Commission for somebody's clap back there.
Rights.
Yes. I just know the acronym.
Like Coalition for Immigrant Refugee Rights.
Yes, Illinois Coalition for Immigrant Refugee Rights. Along with CARE Chicago, the Council of Islamic Organizations. That's not, I worked for CILGC, so I always mix it up. Council on American Islamic Relations, Chicago. They have a newly formed organization as well, which is dealing directly with Know Your Rights, training and education. So we utilize, those organizations, but those are great places for folks who are interested in that type of resource.
Imam, thank you so much for your words and for your testimony. Very, very inspiring. For me, I think that one of the most powerful coalitions in our country is interfaith coalitions. I know that they are not as plentiful as they should be around the country, but in some areas, interfaith coalitions in cities and towns have really worked wonders. And I do believe that we have a government now that is anti-interfaith, that the focus is on a certain brand or kind of Christianity that is to the far right. And I'm wondering whether or not you have the sense or the feeling that building on interfaith coalitions in communities around the nation and maybe making that a national model. There are some national models, but this one in direct response to what's happening in our country right now can help to offset this kind of growing number of folks who are falling under this umbrella of Christian evangelicalism that is anti-interfaith and anti anything but what they believe. Have you run into that in your work here in Chicago? And do you have the same kind of hope that I have that interfaith coalitions can make all the difference in the world when it comes to faith communities?
Thank you for that question. And I wholeheartedly believe that this time is made for interfaith. It was made for broad-based coalitions, and there's nothing like a good enemy, right, to bring people together. Chicago is historically known as a city of neighborhoods, which we say is a code for a segregated city. But when the enemy comes, it forces that segregation to break down. So I believe that the thrust has to be to use our houses of worship, to use our commitment to human dignity, to freedom, the things that we supposedly hang our hats on as Americans, one nation under God. Well, what does God demand of us? And so what can we collectively come together around? And I think in doing that, to your point, yes, it has always been a certain segment of the population that has pushed back against interfaith alignment and coalitions. But that's fine. That's fine. That helps us stay together.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I just want to speak to the quote from the Quran you offered earlier. Oppression is worse than slaughter. It made me think of, and before I be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave. So thank you for lifting up the ancestors through those words. But I want to speak to your lifting up the intersectionality, the Ubuntu narrative of I am because we are, and looking at our intersectionality globally. In this moment, we see an administration that is perpetuating Islamophobia by claiming to act on behalf of Christianity or Christendom. And, we see the threat to Nigeria, the 10th largest provider of oil in the world, and saying, well, this is to protect Christianity. How do we, all of the issues that we have spoken of today, find those intersections in solidarity with those who are being targeted throughout the diaspora, in particular, the Black diaspora?
Wonderful question. I appreciate the framing. We must ask ourselves when what is done in our name, whether it be in the name of Christianity, the name of Islam, the name of Judaism, or whatever, we have to ask ourselves, does the action match the word? And if the word says that we are to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, if it says that we are to, and I'm going to paraphrase here because I'm not a biblical scholar, but it's the idea of embracing the stranger, right? Caring for the stranger. If that is not a staple of our society, if we can't see that being played out as an organizational mandate, as a matter of policy, then we rightly cannot say that it is a reflection of our faith. And these ideas, these are shared across our faiths. So I think it becomes a matter of show and prove, right? You're saying that we're here to save Christianity. What part of Christianity? Right?
If you would, I would also add to what Dr. Neighbors asked, if you place on record some of the interfaith work that you have been a part of, so that we could have that on record in terms of the different organizations and the work that they're doing.
Of course, I'll draw a blank now. The Abolition Institute, number one, it is an interfaith group, right, that focuses on, it's interesting, it focuses on addressing slavery in Mauritania, one of the last places in the world that has outlawed slavery, and it still persists to this day. I am a member, as I said, I'm a board member of Arise Chicago. I am a member of the, I get the newsletters, the Pre-Child Justice Network, which is interfaith as well. I am a member of the, I do between National Talk Board, which I serve as EMAD. We had an organization championing freedom where we did had a group do a play at your illustrious Trinity, United Church of Christ. I have supported a number, probably too many for me to think of. Just had the opportunity as a part of the push weekend, MLK weekend, to offer the invocation for the interfaith service at Covenant, pastored by Pastor Stephen Thurston, second. So I'm an interfaith busybody. Like I said, I've probably forgotten more than I could recall at this moment. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for your testimony today. And I believe that next we are supposed to break for lunch. And Ahmad, would you pray for us for lunch?
You might. Pray us before eating. Dear God, we thank you for allowing us to assemble here today. We thank you for allowing us to speak truth to power. We ask that you continue to bless all those who are here, those who are watching, those who may come into contact with what has been said here later on. We ask that you continue to embolden our spirits, raise our voices, steel our backs for what will come ahead of us. We ask that you bless us as we go into this recess for nourishing food and drink. We ask that you allow us to have a sense of camaraderie, a sense of hope and faith in looking at those who have assembled, those who are here with us. Let us be of one heart, one mind, and one body in our action and our remembrance of you. Accept our good, forgive us for what we have done in error. Amen. I mean, amen.
All of that, all of that.
All of it.
Thank you, family. I want to share the plan. So we're in Nana's house. We're like family. And so we're going to do two things. One, we have sandwiches coming for everybody that will be out in this area. And then the commissioners need a moment as well to talk to one another. And so we're going to go into a designated room to have lunch and to engage one another. And we will come back at 1:20. We'll come back at 1:20. We are expecting the mayor to be the next person to testify. And then quite appropriately, our last testifier for today is one whose expertise is around trauma and intervention, particularly with a focus on youth. Thank you.
Yeah.